Hi. I was hoping it would rain. In spite of them often being at odds with one another, in spite of them often seeming directly opposed to one another, in the interests of happiness and understanding and hopefully a bit of peace, today I'd rather focus on the similarities between religion and science. The first similarity that comes to mind is that both of them use themselves as proof of themselves. God exists. Oh really? Prove that. Well, the Bible says so. Voila. 1 + 1 = 2. Oh really? Prove that. Well, 2 - 1 = 1. Voila. Another similarity is the tendency to ostracize those who don't buy into either one of these disciplines. The first, you might be from a different faith, or you might not be from any faith at all, and then there's a good chance that you might be ostracized by a certain religious community if you're in that community. Similarly, if you don't buy into science, or you believe there's something outside science, or you think that science is just an elaborate hoax, then you're also ostracized and made out to be a complete idiot, which some of you think you rightfully are, but that's what I'm saying. Another similarity is the proclivity for dogma, on full display in both of these disciplines. This is the way, this is the only way, there is no other way because this is the only way. If you think there is another way, then you're wrong, because this is the only way. I would be right and you would be wrong if you don't understand that this is the only way. Another similarity is that both of them build institutions, great cathedrals, in which there is a hierarchy and in which you can go to the top. Some people have a lot of ambition and they want to be the Pope or Einstein. Other people would be a cardinal or Niels Bohr, and then some people are quite happy to be the priest in the village or a professor in an office in a university somewhere. And then of course both of them have their adherents, sometimes at the expense of one another. A final similarity I'd like to focus on is the fact that both of them through the ages have changed their tune depending on what the times or their personal needs require. 600 years ago, the Christian church took a very dim view of homosexuals, and they found ways to punish homosexuality because it was very wrong. Today, most Christian churches do their best to accommodate homosexuals and use the same Bible that they used to condemn homosexuality 600 years ago to prove that it is in fact okay and there is room for you in the Christian faith. In science, 600 years ago, the Earth was the center of the universe. And then Galileo Galilei built a rudimentary telescope, peered a little deeper into space and said, oh my goodness, the sun is the center of the universe. And the church said, no, the earth is the center of the universe. And then Galileo retracted what he had said and said, well, okay, yes, the earth is the center of the universe. And I think he had a good reason, because it's a good enough reason to want to have your head permanently fixed to your living body. But the point is that in the interests of himself and his own good health, he did change his tune. It was subsequently found that not even the sun is the center of the universe, it's just on the outskirts of the Milky Way, which has a center. And there are many such star systems, and basically today we know that there can be no center of the universe because all parts of the universe move away from each other at the same speed, which increases the further they are from one another. But due to the special permissions granted to us by the special theory of relativity, we're okay with saying that the center of the universe is right here, if we're right here. So that puts the center of the universe right back where it was 600 years ago, albeit by a different set of rules. Science has done a very good job of slaying the gods. The great Nordic god Thor, who created thunder and lightning, reigned supreme until science slayed him by saying, no, it's just friction that builds up in rain clouds, and Thor is now dead. There is no use for that god except for teenagers and adults who hadn't grown up who like to watch the movies that he plays in. And the interesting thing is that science has also created gods. Believe it, because it's true. Chaos and randomness, to mention but two. Now, there is no such thing as chaos. Chaos is an admission of our inability to understand something, which is very much science's definition of a god. You don't understand how thunder and lightning is produced, and therefore you have a god, but once you understand that, you can slay the god and move on. And chaos and randomness work like that. It's an admission of our inability to understand something, those are patterns that are so complex that they don't seem to be pattern and they just seem to be randomly happening. It's a bit like this. If I show you a complex piece of music and you don't know anything about music, you'll go, what's that paper with all the lines and dots? It's chaos. Meanwhile, it's a beautiful symphony to someone who understands. And so chaos and randomness work the same, and they work at their best in climate, because there might be a dust devil out there on the plains, and it's such a great amount of factors that created it. Its girth, its length, the speed, its trajectory, the amount of particles in it, and it's influenced by the way the wind curled around a rock 2 miles from there, and it's influenced by every rustling leaf who broke a bit of wind, and by an ant fart. They all contributed in a bigger way or in a smaller way, but at the end of the day, that's chaos for you, and because we don't have the data, we just cannot as yet get all that data together to predict that exact dust devil, and therefore it becomes chaos. Now, we all know that you can't really trust the weather for tomorrow. I know I'm very aware of weather at this stage here in the Highveld. We've just come through the winter, which is our dry season, and but now we're contending with the heat of summer because it's early summer now, and everything is yearning for rain, including myself and my cattle and the plants. And I was actually working with my cattle today, feeding them because the rain is not coming. But 5 days ago I looked on my weather app. Of course I resort to both prayer and weather apps. I would work on all fronts to just get some rain on this farm. And sometimes I go on my weather app and I don't like what I see. It's like, no, I don't like this religion. And then you go to another app and sometimes it gives you a picture that you like a bit more because it's more favorable to your expectations. And 5 days ago I went on the app and I saw that the next day was going to be a 90% chance of rain. I was delighted. The next day I stepped out, inhaled the moist air, waited for rain, which didn't come. But there was a 90% chance. Now, what is this 90%, 30%, 60%? What is that? It's either going to rain or it's not going to rain. It's either going to be a 100% chance of rain or no, 0% chance of rain. But we can't predict that. And I know some meteorology buffs are saying, no, Chris, it's in a certain area and 90% of it will get rain and 10% won't get rain. But you know that also doesn't work that way, and it's just a scapegoat to take it away from the micro-climatological surroundings of the person viewing his weather app. At the end of the day, it's notoriously difficult to predict the weather. You can predict certain trends, and to do it for tomorrow is hard. To do it for the day after is even harder, and to do it 10 days from now is extremely difficult. And that makes me wonder why people would generally readily agree that it's very difficult to trust the weather for tomorrow, but so many people would trust predictions of what's going to happen to the world's climate 10 years from now. Isn't that weird? Now, why would that be? Well, for the answer to that, I would have to refer you to another branch of science. Science, maybe it's not science, maybe it's pseudoscience, but it's called psychology. And psychology will tell you that people are drawn to calamity. We find it very interesting, and fortunately, thank goodness, calamity is fairly rare, which means it has a very high emotional value, market value. And so people can really buy into it, which is why people still go on about 9/11, because it was a massive thing that happened, and we can actually still ride on the wave of calamity and the surge that we got from that. And similarly, we're also riding on the wave of the possibility that all life on Earth might become extinct in 10 years' time because of a climate crisis. So there's another reason which you can also use psychology to explain, and that is that the climate narrative has done a very good job of aligning itself with certain principles of virtue in human nature. Because you care about the environment, you care about people, you care about animals. I haven't been using my hands a lot because my nails are really dirty. I just realized that when I started talking, but I've been out in the field working all day, so can I just say my nails are dirty and get it over and done with so I can use my hands because I'm actually a hand user. That didn't come out right either, did it? Where was I? Right, psychology tells us that people would be drawn towards something that would enhance their virtue capital, because we all want to be good people. And if we don't want to be good people, at least we recognize that it's in our interests to be regarded as good people, because it facilitates life in as much as we have encounters with other people and we are a herd species. So if the climate narrative has been aligned with certain human virtues, those who wish to signal those virtues will find a home in the climate narrative if they go along with it. And of course, if you don't, then you're in trouble. Speaking of which, a while ago I liked a vlog about a lady who made a point about climate activism having created a little saint, again with those similarities. They created a little saint. It's a little girl, and she's very sweet, and she's 16 years old, and she's very passionate about climate. Of course, she's not qualified, and she doesn't know, and that's okay. She doesn't have to know, because even the climate scientists don't know, because they're dealing with chaos. But she made a very good point that throughout the ages there have been child soldiers that were used in conflict to score propaganda points and as human shields, and it's a very cruel thing to do. It's very barbaric, because there's an established line of fire. The conflict already exists, and then you take a child and you insert them in this established line of fire, and if a bullet hits the child, then you can deflect anything that is an issue to do with that conflict and just say, baby killer. So it's very useful, and that's what it's become at the moment. So there's a girl who is the front, not the front, but one of the major fronts, facades for climate activism, and much of the criticism directed at the movement is deflected on the basis of, oh, so you're getting at a little girl. Now that's really manly of you, which is a bit of a problem. Now I liked that, but then I went and I read the comments, and I saw that many people made the comment that because also she mentioned that at the UN climate summit, where a little girl was given a chance to speak to scientists and world leaders, knowing nothing at all about anything, but at least she was passionate and she was representing the passion of millions of people. So I guess there's some value in that. But at the same UN climate summit, a declaration was presented which was signed by more than 500 scientists, engineers and other stakeholders from 23 different countries, stating explicitly that there is no climate crisis, and that the measures that are taken for the notion that there might be a climate crisis is extremely damaging to the world and to markets, especially emerging markets. And then I found these replies, which said that the majority of published scientists, there's consensus amongst published scientists that there is a climate crisis. And when I read that sentence, then I realize the person who quotes that sentence with any sense of gravitas certainly doesn't know much about at least two things. The first thing is obviously climate. But that's okay, because most climate scientists don't know that much about climate, because we're dealing with chaos. Am I having a deja vu? Deja vu? And the other thing is that they obviously don't know much about academia and how academia works. And I'm going to use a simple example, a little simile a metaphor to explain this. Musicians. They just want to play music. That's all they want to do. I know I'm a musician, and all my musician friends, we just love music. That's what we like to do all of the time. But of course there's real life out there. You have to earn your keep and shelter and food and look after your family and blah blah. But most musicians just want to play music. And if they can have all their needs taken care of and all they need to do is play music, they'll go for it. Most musicians want to be superstars, but failing, they're okay with just being ordinary musicians. Some of them become corporate musicians who then play other people's tunes, and they actually get paid fairly well. So they play at corporate functions or they play at weddings, and it's maybe not really what you want to do, but at least you get to play music. And the guys who really suffer, who you don't know, and you don't know their music, is the guy who sits in a basement because he refuses to compromise and he just wants to play his music, and he's playing there and his mother has to look after him. That was me until age 27. And it's a sad state of affairs, but no one knows that guy. But he does exist. So what you do is you take all the guitars in the world and you destroy them. Let's say their combined value is $10 billion, and you destroy all these guitars, and then you recreate only 10 guitars, which means they each have a value of $1 billion, and you say to the musicians of the world, those of you who want to play the guitar, come and audition. So all these musicians come and they audition, of course, and you're the one holding the guitar. The first thing you would do is to go for skill. You would like at least this guy who's going to be the one guy out of how many to play this $1 billion instrument is going to know what he's doing. But then there's more to it than that. There's also what you like. Because maybe you, the owner of the guitar, like jazz. And if he wants to play folk, then that's not what you want. Or you like pop and he plays classic. It's not going to work. So you also choose him, and then you even choose him because you like him, because that's what we do as humans. We go for all these things, and then you get that perfect candidate, and you make them the player of your guitar. Published science works the same. Now, most science you can trust, because it's pretty straightforward, and there's not much to be disputed about it. In structural engineering, you know, there are all these formulas, and you're dealing with steel and the way things work. It's okay. There are and polymers, you know, unless you come up with something new, but generally polymers, you know, you add this, you add that, you've got plastic, that's great. But the scope for improvisation and the scope for obfuscation and the scope for misinformation in climate science is tremendous. Why? Because you work with chaos so much. You work with chaos theory and such random turbulences all over. So there is a great opportunity. And again, if you were the guy who built the atom bomb in the 1940s, you had to be quiet. You couldn't say anything. If you're a guy who's working on nuclear energy now in Iran, and most of the world don't want you to have the bomb, then the UN might send their inspectors and they'll say, are you busy with nuclear stuff? And you'll be like, no, I'm not, which means you're lying. So there are many reasons for scientists, have always been and still are reasons for scientists to change the tune or lie or hide. And this happens in climate more than anywhere else. Why? Because there is so much room to turn it. And why should it be twisted? Why should the data favor something? Wait, before I get to that, I just want to explain that. So a published scientist is also presenting an audition script because you want funding, right? For your research, because that's your bread and butter that you need. Or you want that position in the university so that you can continue your research in a wonderful academic environment. That's like the corporate musician who goes there, or some multinational corporation, or maybe the government uses you for some program, and that's what you'd like. But if the government and the corporation, some corporations, and the frequently government-sponsored institution like the university all have a certain line of thought and a certain narrative that they're pushing in climate science, then you are obliged to stick with that narrative and don't go too far. Don't say things that they're not going to like, because then you're not going to get the job. And that is why published science, especially as far as climate is concerned, is something to be taken with, if not a pinch of salt, at least a grain of salt. Now, why would there be a narrative? Well, that's pretty easy. Because of two reasons. The first is that most of the nations, those nations that work hardest for controlling the climate, as if it's something that can be done, are the nations who have been at the receiving end of the benefits of science and industry and progress for hundreds of years, mostly in Western Europe and Northern America. And they've been using these methods, and that got them to the top, and now they sit there comfortably, and it's great. And now you have all these upstarts. There's barbarians from Nigeria, and there's Chinese. There are so many of them. And of course we can't call them barbarians and whatever else, but we might think it, and we still use our influence to control that, because you would have to be naive to think that any corporation who has a secret or has an advantage is going to do his best to promote other corporations. You might say that you want to do that, but that doesn't mean that you want to do it. And governments are exactly the same. They want to stay on top. So they're not going to give away all their secrets or allow others too easily to get somewhere. And I know it's an incredibly cynical worldview, but this cynical view was not created in my head. You look around yourself every day, and you see what governments do, and you see what politicians do, and you see what businesses do, and you know that that is human nature, and if there's a possibility to do it, there's absolutely a chance. It's not even just a probability, it's a very good chance that it's going to happen. Am I dealing with chaos again? Perhaps I am, but I have seen a pattern emerge in the past. So you want to keep them back, and you want to sell them technologies, my batteries and my special windmills. If you use these things, and you can create energy, and it'll be very good. I get money and you get energy, and don't use the coal. Right, that we've been using. And if it is truly damaging, well, perhaps then it shouldn't happen. But these upstarts also need to get there, and they can make a huge contribution to equality and the world economy, and their own good standing, their own good, progress, lack of vibes, you know. And then there's another reason, which is a lot worse, and that's the issue of carbon tax. It is the greatest, most Machiavellian money scheme that has ever been conceived of in any human mind. It's incredible. Carbon dioxide is something that is the consequence of all industry. It's the consequence of progress, but it's also the consequence of dear life itself. Every living thing generates that. With every breath you exhale, you generate carbon dioxide, and now you want the government to tax that. And you might say, well, they're not going to tax my breath, right? Whatever. Let's look at sugar tax, for example. When I left school in 1989, I weighed 64 kilograms. I went to the army weighing 64 kilograms 30 years ago. And I'm ashamed to say that I let myself go completely since then because of my indulgence in sugar, my love for chocolate, and my love for cake and cookies. I'm the original cookie monster. I love cookies. So I've never watched my sugar, and as a consequence, in the last 30 years, I've gained 1 kilogram, and I now weigh 65 kilograms. And I know I should be ashamed. And then I stand at the fast food joint, and I look to the left of me and to the right of me, and I see huge people who have so much blubber clogging around their hearts that I expect them to drop dead right now. And they also do what I do, pay that R1 extra for something that really tastes like a sugary soft drink. It has been proven, now that's good science, it has been proven that nowhere has sugar tax worked. It doesn't change people's habits, and it certainly doesn't save lives. But the one fact that it definitely always achieves is to funnel tremendous millions, billions of dollars into government coffers all over the world, all the countries that impose those taxes. But it doesn't affect any change. And the same with carbon dioxide. Firstly, you can't trust the government with money and anything. We know that more than other people do in other parts of the world. In this country, we know that more than they do. Do you have power to watch this? Do you have any electricity to watch this thing? I hope you do. But even then people say, yes, but governments are good in Western Europe. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're just better than ours, but that's hardly any measure to measure anything by. They never do anything as good as the private sector does, but that's a different topic. As you can see, I'm probably somewhat libertarian and maybe a hint of anarchy in there as well. But the point is they don't do anything well, and never in the history when someone has tried to save the world through a great act of altruism did it happen with money. This is an excuse to funnel money towards the governments for something that cannot be proven and verifiably be predicted on the basis of certain patterns. And it's also something that you open up a can of unimaginable horror worms when you allow them to tax carbon dioxide, because you do exhale them. And once the precedent has been set, it goes on and on and on, and you might think I'm paranoid. You might think I'm paranoid. I am. Alright, so there we have it. Climate science, chaotic. Climate scientists who publish works also publish audition scripts, and that's the way academia works. But let's get back to the cathedrals. The cathedral of, let's say, Christians who go to the cathedral to praise God and to be one with other Christians and just enjoy this wonderful vibe. But we know that each one of those individuals also go there for their own little thing, you know. Maybe her husband hit her, and she resents him so. So she goes to the church to pray for protection, and she goes to the church to ask that her heart does not get filled with hate. Maybe there's a guy who stole something from someone, and he goes to the church for absolution and to promise God that he will do it right next time. Maybe there's someone who's poor, who has absolutely no money and no chance in life, and they feel, my family can't eat, so they go to church and they pray, God, please help me get a job, find a job so I can look after my family. So there's the big issue that people go to the cathedral for, but they also go for their own little agenda. Similarly, in the cathedral, where the God of chaos reigns supreme, in the cathedral of climate, people go to that cathedral for a good reason, to save the world, but also each one of them bring their own little issue there, and I've seen it. And if you read, not between the lines, you just need to read the lines in comments and in often journalism to figure out what it is. Maybe her husband cheated on her, and unfortunately, I don't know how this came to be, but a lot of the climate activism, and especially the criticism of the little Swedish girl, is people are throwing it back at middle-aged white men. That it seems to be that thing, middle-aged white men. I've seen on social media that that's a narrative that gets pushed a lot. So maybe her husband cheated on her, and she goes there because it's a good place to lash out at the middle-aged white men. She just finds a home with that crowd. It makes her feel better because she has this anger that she carries with her. There's going to be at least one person who goes there, and maybe more than one, who goes there with that sort of agenda. Maybe there's someone who eats more than they should, and wastes and doesn't recycle, and they feel better if they can join this movement. It's sort of an absolution for them, like the guy who stole from someone and goes to church. Maybe it's someone who feels that in a capitalist free market society they just can't get to the top, and they're struggling financially all the time. It really frustrates them, and they want to tear the system down. They want to see these big industrialists and capitalists go down because they're so frustrated with their situation. And so they also go to the cathedral of the climate, where the God of chaos reigns, and they find a home there because there is this agenda which is, amongst many other things, also promoted in that movement. So one has to be aware of that, and you should ask yourself, why are you going to the cathedral? And once you've asked yourself and answered that, and maybe gotten a purer view on either the one or the other or both, because that's possible too, or neither, that's also possible, remember that the best way to do missionary work is not to behead people, or to ostracize them, or to impose your dogmas on them, or to repeatedly repeat your proof of yourself by yourself, or to change your tune according to what the weather, the political weather or the social weather of a particular time demands. The best way to do missionary work is to have a vibe that makes people gravitate towards you and ask themselves, what do you have that is so special, so beautiful, so kind, so helpful? And that's how you convert people.